I'm going to start with about 3 slides just to set the stage a little bit, but then I'll jump right into the demo. All right. I'll just want to quickly give you the context of my talk today. So what I'm focusing on today. So this is the CAP diagram, the very high level one. And so what we're focusing on today is this CDS. Yes, you're familiar with how CAP works. I'm just not going to touch it anymore. Right, so you have several inputs, then everything is transformed into season, and then you have outputs. And what I'm focusing on today in this pictures is from CDS over to season, and then this HANA DDL walks. This is what we're going to do today. If you don't know, by default, the HANA DDL is generated as HDI artifacts. And what is HDI? Just a very quick refresher. HDI is the HANA deployment infrastructure. It's a declarative persistence modeling, and say this is the state that I want to have. And HDI takes care of transforming this into database objects that you can reference later. It's based on containers. So that means each container, which means each persistency, for example, underlying a microservice is isolated from the next one. Also in development scenarios, it's easy to just spin up new instances without interfering with, for example, the production instances or instances from other developers. And so today, the main theme is how can I extend CAP to better integrate with HANA Cloud? So this is how it works usually. You have a CDS file with some, for example, entity definition, and during the CDS build, this gets transformed into SQL. And what you can see here, this is actually what one of the HDI artifacts looks like. In this case, it's an HTTP table, and it's very much looks like HANA SQL. But still, you can reference it in your application. And this is the one way. The other way is if you have something already native to HANA, say a calculation view, you can then reference this back into CAP, annotate it a little bit, and then CAP has some knowledge about what you just did on the database, and then can use this to interact with it from the application runtime and also expose it as services and such. All right, enough for slides. Let's see how this works. All right, I'm here in Business Application Studio. If you haven't seen it, that's it. Looks very much like VS Code, no coincidence, because it's actually based on VS Code. So if you're familiar with VS Code, you're probably also familiar with Business Application Studio. All right, and so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a new project, a CAP project in my case. I'm just going to call it Demo Recap. And since I wanted the HANA development, I'm going to check the configuration for HANA development. HANA is always MTA based at the moment, so that's why we also have to check the MTA box. And I'm also going to add some sample files so I don't have to write everything from scratch. All right, here. Regular VS Code file tree with the project that it's been generated. And down here, that's the other important thing that you get when you work with HANA projects. It's this HANA Project Explorer. And this HANA Project Explorer provides sort of a logical view of the project from a HANA perspective. So as you can see here, you only see the things that are relevant to HANA. And in particular, you don't see any CDS files, for example, because CDS is not a HANA artifact. But we'll see how these play together in a second. Now, So if you want to do HANA development, the first thing you always do is you bind this to a service instance on BTP, which will then generate the respective artifacts in a HANA database. So you always do sort of this hybrid development model that CAP also has. All right, and you have a bind button here. In this case, I want to bind it to an HDI container. And so I'm just going to choose the default one because that's the easiest option. And so now down here, you can see it's now creating the service instance on BTP in my CF space that I'm already logged into. Didn't want to bore you with the login screen, so you just have to believe me that this is what it does. All right, while this is creating, I can show you a little bit the anatomy of this project. So the most important thing that I'll be working with is this DB module, which contains all the database artifacts and the CDS files for the CAP entities that will end up in the database later. And so this project is a very, very simple bookshop example with really just the books table. And on the service side, it has one service that just exposes the books. And it has a whopping 2 example books, Wuthering Heights and Jane Eyre. And so if you ran this as a CAP application, this is what you would get, just a simple service that exposes these 2 books. Let's see. All right, as you can see, now I have found my project. And now the first thing that we could do is, what happens if I just build this, meaning build the project and deploy it to HANA. I'm just going to hit the rocket here. And as you can see, it's doing some stuff. And here it's actually running the deployment. And as you can see, it did deploy it correctly. And you can see, there's some information what it actually did deploy, some table data, the CSV, the table definition. So far, so good. If you want to look into what it actually did, there's an option to open the HANA Database Explorer. And so let's do this really quick. Takes a tiny little bit to load. There we go. And now it's actually already adding the service instance that I just created. It's already automatically adding it to the Database Explorer. So it's nothing that I need to do here. And then what did I name it? Demo recap. Let's make this a bit bigger. All right, here it is. So let's just take a look. We know there's at least a table in it. So let's go to the tables, click on that. And here you can see, here's the bookshop. If I open the data, you can see there's my 2 books. So far, so good. Now, let's see, what can I add to this that makes it maybe a little bit more interesting? So one thing that HANA has is a whole bunch of multi-model capabilities that goes from a JSON doc store to a graph engine, spatial, multi-dimensional analytics, all kinds of things. And so what I'll do now is I'll add a doc store collection that can hold JSON documents. And then I'll add some information to this JSON document store and then combine this with the book table that I have. And then in the end, put some a calculation view on top to do some analytics. All right, here we go. First, we have a little wizard that helps you create HANA artifacts with this create HANA database artifacts here. Now I need to make this a little bigger. And so I said I want to have a collection. So I'm going to add this collection here. I'm going to name this title info. Click create, and it created it. So this is I think the most simplistic artifact that we have. This is actually all that it needs, just the name. All right. And once you've done something, you can always try it out and see if it deploys in the database. By clicking on various places with rockets. Sometimes this has to install the deployment library, but once it's done that, it should be complete. So let's do that. Once it's installed the dependencies, then it starts the deployment. And as you can see here, making OK, and it's deployed to collection. So far, so good. Now that we have the collection, we can actually add some data into it. because otherwise you won't see much later. I'm just adding a little bit of data that adds some more information about the two titles that I have in my books. So I'll show you really quick. Here I can go to my JSON collection. So I see the collection that I just, and I can do redo JSON. So there's some more information that I have in that JSON structure for both titles. You know, they have some information about the author and the classification information like ISBN. So let's see if we can combine this somehow. One thing that I'll add in between is actually a table function that extracts some information from the JSON and puts it in a more flat structure because it's easier to use in a calculation view. So I'll create another database artifact, this time a function. I'm going to call this get title info. Again, click create. And so it generates me a nice little structure here, sort of a thing that I can use to fill it out. So what I want from this is actually information, say, about the author. And so I want this to return a table. The one is the title, just so I know that I actually selected the right thing, and I need something to actually specify what I want from this table function. And then I want the name of the author. All right, and how do I get this? Well, I select this from my collection. So I do a return, select something from my title info. And I, of course, need to learn how to type. Okay, what do I select? You know, we had the title here as a top level element, and the author name sort of as a nested element under name. And here we can make use of the HANA Doc Store. So I can select the title. One thing I need to do is I have to make sure it matches what I've defined up here. So this is just, you know, giving it a different name. And then when it comes to the author, right? So I say author dot name, and I say as author. Right, and so this goes into the JSON, grabs the author name, and exposes this as this table function here. Again, to make sure that we didn't make any stupid mistake, do one deployment, let the database decide whether this is okay what we did, and it is okay, right? It says making okay. All right, next step, analytics on top of that. For that, I'll create a calculation view. And by the way, what I'm showing here with the individual database artifact is nowhere near what HANA can do. But I have only 20 minutes and not 2 hours, so I have to limit myself what I can show here. But nevertheless, the principles are the same. And if you're really into analytics, you can have a week-long workshop if you want to learn everything about calc views. All right, now let's do my really simple calc view. And so this is it. This is the top level of the calc view. It has a projection on top. But like I said, what I would like to do now is actually do a join between that books table and my books collection. So what I'll do is I'll add a join. The first thing I need is the books table. And this now is actually going out, looking at the database, checking the objects that I have and listing them. So here's the table for my books. And the second thing that I want to join with it is actually nothing, obviously. Oh, but see, it knows what I want to join. Here we go. It's the table function. Not yet, but it looks like it, right? We've always been that intelligent. All right, so here you have to join now. And here you can say, okay, fine. Obviously, I want to join a title because that's the only thing that I have in common. I'm just going to, for now, assume that in the collection, I only have, you know, one title for each. So I'm just going to say it's actually an end-to-one join. And in case I don't have anything in my collection, you know, because it might be, you know, populated from some random source, I'm just going to say, let's make this a left outer join. So I at least have something still from the books and the record doesn't vanish completely. So far, so good. Then I just have to propagate some columns to the next level. And in this case, I want ID, title, stock, and of course the author, which is why I'm doing all of this. Good. Now let's connect this to the output node up here. And here you can see I'll just propagate all of this and should be good here. Let's see. All right, deployment worked, making okay. That's a valid calculation view. And now at this point, you could even take your SAC client, point it at this calculation view, and build your dashboard in SAC if you wanted to. That's perfectly valid, for example, for your SAC Live connection. So that would already work. One thing that I'll show you still is how to get this back into CAP. And I had this on the slide already before. So what I'll do is I'll put this proxy entity here. So I'm going to call this book CV as well. We know it has the 3 columns from book. And the 4th column is the author, also a string. All right, and because this is not actually an entity that I want CAP to manage, I have to annotate this with persistence exists. And there's actually a annotation for calculus as well, which becomes relevant as soon as you add parameters, because there's a different parameter syntax. And for this, I also add another service. I'm going to name this analytics service. Well, 1 service is enough. And of course, I want this to go to the book CV. Now, since I'm running out of time, I'll do one thing. You can ask me later why I'm doing that. I'll leave that as a homework for the listener. And what I'm doing is I have to add a synonym between. This is actually also in the CAP documentation. So there we go. And what I'll have to do is I'll have to create a synonym. It's called my bookshop book CV, and I'll point it to book CV. And at this point, we're just going to deploy everything again. And it doesn't like it because no, it's not. Oops. Probably misspelled something. There we go. Okay, so everything deploys now. If we have another minute, I can even run it. Do we have a minute? Okay. All right. So what I'll do here is I'll bind it to my service. And I'll get the service name from here. So I don't have to actually type it. And I have a service key, and that binding worked. Very nice. Then we can run it. And it'll know in a minute that something changed. Here we go. Open in a tab. Okay, so far so good. And if you check the Fiori preview, and of course we have to select the columns here and click OK. With any luck, here we go. We have the author information that's actually coming from a document store collection in HANA. Excellent. And with that, I'm done. Thank you.